Innovation is important to all companies, but for startups, it is the very premise. Maybe that's why startups and innovation share a special bond. Innovation comes in many forms. Our next lightning speaker is the founder and CEO of Xperience Plus, a startup with the goal of allowing people to experience unlimited realities, removing all the geographical, economical, and physical barriers, and in the meantime, disrupt the media industry. Coming with over 15 years of experience in innovative projects, his professional inclinations are towards AI, human machine interaction, and artificial intelligence. He's a huge fan of biohacking and human augmentation. Please welcome Fabrizio Gramuglio. Over to you, Fabrizio.
Thank you a lot, Mainstage, for inviting me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on your time zone. So let me disappear so you can see my slide, not myself, and we can start. So, as you say, today the goal and the topic is exactly about Internet of Senses. And I would like to start with the coffee. As you know, or at least guess from my name, I'm Italian. And in Italy, the coffee is sacred, absolutely sacred. It's so sacred that when Starbucks had to, or tried to open the first shop in Italy, they have been forced to use Italian coffee instead of the Starbucks kind of coffee. So let me share my coffee with you. It's here with me. And kicking off our trip in the Internet of Senses. Oh, I hope you can feel the scent. It's not that burned oil smells you have sometimes when you take a coffee in a bar, and the taste of this little ancet of sweet and walnuts. Not the brutal robusta that German people like, and for me, as Italian, it's a problem. But unfortunately, you can't, because our favorite media today are only audio and video, so far at least. So my goal today is to bring you in an incoming reality where media can stream perform, taste, touch, and more. So what is Internet of Senses? If you will go online and will Google Internet of Senses, you basically find one report from Ericsson and 1,000 copycats with a lot of not so precise information. iOS is based on a very simple concept. You will be able to use your 5 senses while interacting with Internet, plus two more fundamental accessory features: brain-computer interfaces and embodiment. But before moving forward and explaining the details and the impact on your life, products, services, and the future startup that I hope will be created this evening, let's make a bit of history. So in 1914, two things happened. One, the most famous one, was for sure the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. You know, he was with his wife, Sophie, Duchess of Honenburg, and occurred on 28th of June. And this act led to the start of the First World War. But some months before, an Italian guy called Giovanni Rapazzo patented a very disruptive invention, the audio inside a silent movie. And it's changed the movie industry forever. Maybe forever is a big word. Let's say until today. But something in our evolution gone wrong, because after 100 years, we are still there, audio and video only. So let's start our journey in the Internet of Senses, one sense at a time. And let's start with taste. You know the motto, seeing is always believing. Looks can deceive. That's why, as newcomer to the physical world, babies learn about an object. How? By instinctively putting in their mouth. Until now, our online existence has not allowed us to practice digital mouthing. But that is set to change. Could you imagine putting a device in your mouth that digitally enhances the food you eat, so that anything and anyone can taste exactly what you want? So a lot of people interviewed by Ericsson think that the device will be there in 2030. But maybe you saw this picture online as something that already exists. Could you imagine the implication for your health diet by enabling us to eat healthy food and yet event us like 5-star restaurant cuisine. Taste greatly inform you the way we remember the past. Think back to your childhood, and I'm sure you almost certainly remember the taste of certain treats, home cooking, or ice cream. The ability to enhance such memory with digital taste going forward picture for parties and holidays that will let you only see what happened, but also the savor, the sweet, and the sour of it all. For example, are usually popular among customers in grocery store so people can try before they buy. Many accept a taster even if we are not actually considering a purchase. Can you imagine the revolution in online shopping as we gain the ability to digital taste samples from the comfort of our devices and sofa? Nearly as many believe that will be TV cooking programs that allow us to practice the taste of the food on screen. This type of digital sensory information will be financed by advertising, indicating that our taste reactions are not perceived by as sensitive as many other kind of personal data. So, if you are looking for idea, start thinking about virtual cocktails, share my coffee, advertising for restaurant, or why you don't go to the chat and start showing your idea how you can think you can use tastes for your next startup. So my invitation now is to take some second, go to the chat and start throwing ideas while I'm jumping on the other taste. And now let's talk about smell. Smell represents a powerful connection with our memory, as explained, for sure you know, in the episode of Madeleine, taken from Remembrance of a Thing Past by Marcel Proust. We may have all, but maybe we lost understanding of fragrances. Modern people use deodorant to conceal their body odors and traffic exhaust foam in our bustling mega city, make us numb to olfactory sensation. We may even think that our noses is just a place to put your glasses, or sometimes a reminder that we have got a cold. In reality, smell is more and more important. The chemical language of scent in a physical sensation that affects us directly and deeply. This is why, for example, car manufacturers make sure that the cars smell while they are new. Or why coffee shops are so much more alluring than vacuum-packed coffee from the supermarket. Typical online experiences today doesn't involve scent. However, consumers are estimating our sense of smell to be a key part of the internet by 2030. More than half of the world population already live away from nature, and continued urbanization drive has created ourselves to be, let's say, disconnected from natural experiences. For this reason, the ability to digital visit forest and countryside and experience the natural smell of those places is a very big need now in the market. And if you don't believe it, take a look at some companies that are now proposing this kind of virtual trip, or physical trip in virtual reality. This is the mostly highly held expectation among the smell-related concept today. And it indicates a strong need for deeper immersion that the standard video, the today platform can offer. The experience of watching type of video will feel more and more immersive if we could smell the action. This is a pretty specific case, but in the same interview, 56% of the interviewer say that they will be able to digital savor all the smell in films they watch. Even if the smell is a long story, we have been attempting to incorporate in scent during film as back in early 1916. We had a lot of failure, we have a lot of problem with technology, infrastructure, and other things we will cover later. But finally, the technology doesn't have to cause a stink. We will be able to avoid bad smell whenever we choose. We're more than half expecting a device that digitally transforms stink smell into nice fragrance in their nose. And what else? For example, we will have digital perfume for avatars in virtual reality. or we will explore virtual reality world with smells. So again, here, let's make some example. I will start and I will invite people to use the chat and float idea in. Next National Geographic documentary will have smell, so you can visit Antarctica and feel the smell of this area, or you can go into the rainy forest. Your favorite Netflix series, for example, could have smell. Advertising, again, it's a perfect example if you think about restaurant. And again, please feed the chat with ideas, and maybe at the end of the day, we will have some new startups. Let's move to the next one, touch. You know this picture, you know this game is Mario Kart. And if you play Mario Kart, I'm sure you had a lot of fun if you have a vibrating controller. However, those who try VR version of Mario Kart agree that it's even more funnier if you have a kind of mock-up cart, homemade cart that's shake in sync with the game to create the impression of a moving vehicle. Digital touch is set to grow way beyond the rumble of your game controller or the haptic devices of the current VR system. Going forward, people will think of digital touch as something affecting their whole body, not just their hands. The most easy to imagine feature for consumers is the physical impact of sound. A lot of people imagine the future earphone that can digital transfer the physical impact of live concert bass to their chest. But we are already in the market. You can go to Amazon and buy them. After ear or swiping, for example, what if the next smartphone will have a screen able to convey the shape and the texture of the digital icon, button, and cloth while you press them? But the ability to feel digital texture might go way beyond the confinement of the smartphone screen. We are talking about wristbands that stimulate the nerves so you can feel any digital object, and they will be available again in 2030. We could digital feel anything from something simple like a ball to the skin of another person. The application of touch tech or the touchy thing or the Internet of Senses may be nearly limitless. Another example is obviously that these armbands will transmit the sense of weight and motion. So the digital option they touch seems fully real. Again, some example as we did for the other thing. In 2020, a company made a remote surgery using robot surgery using haptic feedback in 2020. It was in May. This was the first example for Washington, D.C. to Malaysia. And we use the ability to touch what we are doing, not only controlling with VR, but feeling. As we saw in the picture before, try to imagine the impact on the fashion-related online shop. And as always, please don't forget the chat, throw your idea because we will discuss them in a while. And now a bit of break from senses and just an accent, let's say a small chant of brain-computer interfaces. Obviously, I'm sure you are heard about Elon Musk and his new bold project called Neuralink. I mean, it's not the purpose of this keynote to enter in technical discussion about the feasibility of the project. I'm sure most of you heard about the issue of implanting microelectrodes inside your brain or using electrodes in general, but let's move to the wider vision. Internet-to-brain communication or brain-to-brain communication means the ability to transfer data from internet to the brain. As you can imagine, we'll have an impressive impact on our ability to get the data, elaborate them, and even on our communication. As you know, for example, you always think faster when you talk, and you talk faster when you type or write. Try to imagine to remove the physical action of talking and typing and communicate directly brain to brain. Or another good example could be, for example, if you are needing a good coffee or a good food, we can immediately stream to your brain. Probably you will have somewhere in your vision a pop-up from Starbucks, but this is something we will solve sooner or later. So we will explore, for example, virtual reality world with our brain. We will interact with others and data. The outside reality and the various level of data-based reality will merge. Okay, we move pretty faster in the spatial web, sorry, but this is where we are going. So let's go back to some simple example. Using the brain interface could mean the end of keyboard, mouses, game controller, and ultimately user interface for any digital devices. The user only think the command and they will happen. Smartphone could even work without touch devices. So we will not have more devices, not more USB-C, Apple connector 1, 2, 3, 1, 5. By the way, what's the problem with standards? So we will stop charging devices. How many times you have, oh, I have my phone, I take my phone, oh, no battery. That's life. Aren't you tired of devices? I totally am. So if the small price for getting rid of mobile phone, tracker, under-skin chip, Bluetooth devices, VR headset, PlayStation controller, mouse, TV remote controller is a small chip in my brain, I'm ready to sign the agreement now. And by the way, this will bring another very important thing. We will probably solve the problem of electronically highly polluting waste. So we made some example. They are obviously only small example, but try to think of another important, impactful application. Think about people who have some kind of peripheral neural trauma or damage. For example, a person without legs can feel what does it mean to run back on a shore and feel the warmth of the sand, the water, and more. So with this technology, the concept of integrity and privacy obviously will take a new meaning. How you will control the flow of the data that will basically storm into your brain. Data privacy, data agency, data virtual agent will be another impressive opportunity for companies and startups. And now let's take a look at the embodiment. So what is embodiment? For sure you heard about this movie, it's called The Gamer. So embodiment basically means you can own, control a body, so you can be inside and even experience different stimuli of another body that is somewhere in the world. Honestly, this game was based on the concept exactly of the embodiment. So basically there are human being player controlled by the other human participant in an online game killing each other. That was the plot. And the result on IMDb was not exactly a success, but still worth the idea. The embodied experience is also couldn't be only in real time. You can pre-record them, which means you can enjoy moment of any other person that were recorded before and you could use them. In simple words, you find yourself as an avatar inside another person. And let's make another example of a great movie. And if you didn't see that, it's worth. It's a movie from 1985. Catherine Bigelow is the name of the director. And it's a fantastic story about pre-recorded experience that allow a user to experience recorded memories and physical sensation. So basically, the character is able to sell real-time experiences made by other people with more than the 5 senses. And this time, IMDb score is even better. So take a note and take a look at the movie. So, for example, we saw a lot of research where virtual reality can induce embodiment by creating multi-sensory stimuli combining first-person perspective. You can have synchronous visual, tactile stimuli, as well as visual and motor synchrony. So another good example for you, if you want to be, let's say, if you want to learn more, is exactly this one. It's called The Machine to Be Another. The Machine to Be Another is an embodiment virtual reality system allowing the individual to experience the world through the eye and the body of another person. It's inspired by a neuroscience protocol and allow you to have a very wide perception on other person's body. The setup is pretty easy. So basically, there's a performing, wearing, front-facing, in a camera recording video that is live streaming to the virtual reality headset of another user. So this allowed two people share a first-person perspective at the same time. Another great experiment. So another example for The Machine to Be Another that I again recommend to take a look is, for example, swapping body from male to female, or this other example that I love. So the opportunity for a wheelchair. For a person in a wheelchair to feel what does it mean running or dancing. And sorry for the advertising, also there's the first marketplace for embodied realities, where you can embody into other people on request and feel basically unlimited experiences. But so let's go back to the point. So I will cut down the presentation. So what does it mean for you? This is what I would like to discuss later in the roundtable. What does it mean for startup? We throw some idea, and I would like you also to, as I say, use the chat to throw more idea. And let me close with a little sorry. I mean, that's the time for apologize. So basically, I want to apologize with the audience and the main stage. The audience, because I present to you the Internet of Senses as something that will happen in 9 years from now. And that's not true. In the next couple of months, 4 months, you will be able to have 4 senses experiences. Yes, we are in late with test. That's the problem. But you can have streaming video in real time, streaming video on demand, VR, AR, mixed reality in the next event. And with Mainstage, because this is my personal second advertisement, and also just one more second to thank Mainstage, especially Sven, because it gave us a lot of opportunity. It trusts us, and he understands the project is not futuristic or impossible. So this is the last slide. Let me close with my keynote with a very easy question. I hope you understood that everything you ever know about media will be disrupted. So the question for you is this one. Do you want to be an actor of this transformation? If yes, contact us, visit me at Xperience Plus booth, contact me on LinkedIn. We will be very happy to support you and support each other. That's it.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you. This was a really, really wonderful presentation. I have attended your previous sessions, and this was just as insightful as the previous ones. I'm very sure it must have been very helpful for our audience too. However, moving on, we believe that innovation and branding goes hand in hand. That's why our next lightning speaker believes in branding and the influence it has on passing the message of innovation. He is the co-founder and managing partner at Clear, has been aiding startups and multinational corporations navigate the intersections of the brand story, customer experience, and technology-driven scale effects. He acts as a mediator between corporations and startups to set up new ways of working, define a shared benefit story, and introducing an agile methodology to iterate minimal viable brands and products to proof of concept. Please welcome Alexander Wood.
Hi there, Joel. It was very fun to hear about the Internet of Senses, and I can't even make my camera work. So that's the reality of technology right now in my life. Anyway, hope everyone's great. I'm glad to be here. I was also at the summit when it was physical in Bangalore last year, and it was really great. Now this is obviously a bit different. Happy to take you through some thoughts. I did change the subject a little bit because of who I saw was going to join here. So I hope that's okay. So if there's, without any further ado, I'll just get started. My name is Alex Wipf. I'm a co-founder managing partner of Clear Germany. Clear is a global innovation strategy consultancy incubator. We're currently around 70 people. We've been around for 16 years, and we're now in 6 countries around the world. We get to work for a number of blue chips and fairly well-known clients, from tech stars like Google and Amazon, and even Apple, which is not even on here, I just realized, Disney and so on, to reputable financial firms, pharma companies, as well as consumer electronics brands and utility brands, to retail, automotive, and also FMCG and fashion apparel. So our focus has been helping these clients get along in times of change, and we usually answer questions such as, where do we find growth in the marketplace? And more of that growth is coming from startups, which is why this is such a relevant topic right now. Also, what is our purpose? What are our strategic bets? How can we take some of these bets and incubate them fairly quickly to achieve proof of concept? And then also, how do we find, use new ways of working to deal with, scale situations and new ecosystems with new partners, right? So I don't usually do this, okay? I never have bar charts in my presentations, but there was a crisis apparently last year with this virus thing. So it's like, look, let's just, and there was some complaints as well about this. From startups. So I just looked at the situation, and I actually did looked at some data. If you look at the venture financing market, there was actually nothing bad happening. I mean, look, it's like always, it's up, it's growing like crazy. And also in Europe, at least, we have a lot of venture capital from corporate ventures coming in, which is great because Europe has been a bit slow on that, and so that's good news. And also in a study that actually one of the participants here, DJ's company, is mentioned in Bosch. In a study, MIT Capgemini is also thinking that the R&D function and BU staff functions are really moving to innovation lab startups. So startups as a source is increasing for innovation for big corporates. So that's all really, really great, isn't it? Also, in a study we just recently did, as Clear, we asked 750 CEOs about a number of things, and one of them was a cross-functional partnership. Obviously, cross-functionality is very important to get innovation started. So they also believe, 70% of them believe, that it's going to increase over the next couple of years. So all of that is very good, isn't it? And but of course, there's a but, because if there wasn't, I wouldn't have a great presentation. So obviously, with all of that said, there's also another thing that you might have already seen in the first chart. Actually 2020 wasn't that great if you started out. So if you're looking for angel and seed money, you're back to 2013 in terms of just number of deals closed. So even though that deal volume in total was, fairly good, still, if you're starting out, it wasn't that great. Also part of our study, we found out that, maybe CEOs and CMOs think that they have a well-defined strategy, but what ultimately actually ends up, percolating out of the boardroom down the ladder is a totally different story. So this is, obviously a thing that also hinders innovation still. And that's maybe also why, you hear stuff like accelerators not really working, which is, of course, kind of good for accelerators like, Mainstage Accelerator, because another study has actually shown that, startups do grow with independent accelerators. They actually decrease in growth with corporate accelerators. So obviously, I'm here to help change whatever accelerator work with, corporates and startups. And so, but there is some, news around this that we should look at. So usually, again, I don't do bar charts, but I thought it was in the context of last year. And if we look at innovation, is that even something we can afford? If you have a startup and you have great ideas, should you continue? Yes, you should, but you should stay clear of a couple of things, which is why I thought, look, I'm going to just take a couple of, try to see if we can come up with a couple of best practices that we've come across in our work with startups and corporates that I can share with you. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you is that you should be clear with each other on what you mean by innovation. And this seems like such an obvious point, but it actually is such a confusing term because it's overused. What do you mean by innovation? There's so many different types of innovations. There's also a lot of buzzwords and also tons of models that explain innovation, such as 3 types of innovation model, 10 types of innovation, 27. It's just insane. So what do you mean by that? So when you start out, like this is my definition of innovation, but which is very simple in a sense, which is it's a solution to a problem that's worth solving, which is already easier said than done, but it ultimately creates at least incremental growth in an existing or new marketplace, right? So that if you set on that, that then it's not a difficult situation to then imagine that we have to separate this. And this is actually kind of a really important point, especially when you are a company that has a technical business case or technical idea that you're trying to look to scale or sell, because innovation is a technical issue. You can have a technical invention, but it's only going to grow if you're being innovative about it. And the difference is very clear. And I always use this example. Everyone knows this man. No one knows that man, or not a lot of people. Maybe some uber nerds know this guy, Karl-Heinz. And he invented MP3 at the Fraunhofer Institute, right? So his briefing was very sciencey. It was invented compression psychoacoustic model. Now, that's, I don't even know what that was supposed to mean, but it means that, files get smaller ultimately in an MP3. And now Steve said, thank you very much there, German guy, Karl-Heinz. I'm going to just reuse that to brief it songs in people's pocket. The rest is history, as they say, which is the iPod came, which was the precursor to that a module like the iPhone, which then created also a whole marketplace for app developers and so on. And it created. And so what's the difference between invention and innovation? Well, on one hand, invention goes deep into science and technology. Innovation is actually retooling stuff, and then making a lot of money with it. Okay, so Karl-Heinz is still, at the Fraunhofer Institute. Steve Jobs, unfortunately, is on cloud, whatever, but he's become very famous. So invention and innovation, big difference. And why is that important in the case of work and vice versa? It's because, what are you really here to do, right? Are you going to frogging, like you're going to invest your time together into a specificity of a solution, meaning building the better mousetrap, or you're going to, and also look at product innovation or maybe even an invention, or are you going to disrupt the market where you're going to look for breadth of adoption, meaning I want to find more in the right mice, and I want to engage in brand and ecosystem innovation. It's really important because if you want to do more than incremental innovation, and you want to move the bar a little bit on significance of your innovation, you're going to go either one away from 1 to 4 in one huge step. You're going to have to negotiate what your relationship's going to be. And that also brings me to the next point. As you can, so this is one model by Keeley, Pickle, Quinn, and Walters from 2013 that I still use these days. This the 10 types of innovation is be as specific as you can in that moment of what innovation you're talking about, because a lot of confusion that the people bring in. So for example, if you're a technically minded startup and you're working with a brand minded, corporate, when they talk innovation, they might mean service channel and brand innovation. And, you might be talking about technical or the other way around. And suddenly, you don't know what the brief is anymore. And it's going to be a really weird day in the office, right? So, and also, that brings me to the second kind of hint that I have and advice. Be clear on your mutual benefit story in POC definition, okay? So for the proof of concept definition, that should be actually a pretty long and worthwhile exercise, because it's going to make or break the case for whatever it is you do together. Again, with the example before, let's say you're working on a technology POC, and that's totally fine. It might be totally cool for you as a venture client here is going to buy my technology solution. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be fine. I'm out of here. I'm going to do the next thing. That's totally cool. But at the same time, maybe you don't want to just stick with the POC for the technology. Maybe it's a market adoption POC that's going to really help you understand how to scale this thing bigger and what to do and change in the product formulation or configuration to actually figure out what's going on. And or the next level, business model POC. So you're not just looking at, just the technical side of things, or just an adoption of what could be if people did whatever X, just look at the whole thing of partners, ecosystems, so on, to really make sure it flies. So whatever it is, just define the scope of your POC really well, spend the time on it. even if you think that the second or third workshop is already too much, it isn't. It never is. It's like the more defined you get at the beginning about the PC and the metrics that matter for your PC, the better off you are. Because why am I saying this too? This is an example everyone knows. It's obviously the example of Kodak. They actually were smart enough to spend the tons and tons and tons of money that they made, having 90% of the market share in film processing, into their huge R&D department, and they invented the thing that killed them, meaning the digital camera. So this is a great example of you had 30 years to find a business model for the thing you invented yourself, and you failed. So that's what I mean is, don't stop with the technical POC unless that's what makes you happy, and you want to get to the next thing. If you really care about your business and not just your technical side of the business, then you should really look at the long term of this thing. All right. The third thing, be clear on your ways of working, but stay clear of agile myths. And this is kind of more going towards the corporates that may be listening in here. Because this is a thing that we've come across a lot, because there's sort of this myth of agile and sexy, that agile is sort of like, it has been a mot du jour for a while now, and obviously it's not about labs and beanbags and just making fun rooms. And now, not anyway, because of COVID, everyone's at home. It's about tools, right? And it's not about just, oh yeah, let's just have an entrepreneurial attitude. It's about actually knowing the methodology behind some of this stuff. And it's agile doesn't mean you're just flexible and do whatever. It's about being adaptive and resilient, and you don't get there just by deciding in your brain that you do. You have to actually work for it. And also, and this is a myth, just don't hire young people to tell us about digital. It's actually about really cross-pollinating, everything from your R&D function across the whole business, and then without the politics that's usually involved. So, because the inconvenient truth is that if you really want to innovate, potential disruption to a stable organizational state in which you are as a business, maybe it's stable but declining, and that's why you need to innovate, and that, but it's a stable organizational state, and you're going to go in there and you're going to disrupt that. Okay. So, and the inconvenient truth number 2 in here is that the transition needs to be unstable and complex, and it should not be, or to quote another famous person depicted here, don't stop when the muscle is burning. Okay, so that's what he said on Mr. Schwarzenegger, and he's completely right about this, because harmony is great for. So that's very inconvenient for a corporate to accept. And if you want to work with a startup, you're going to have to really deal with this. And to some degree, you're not going to be able to just get, the best without the homework. And that's just one of those things. So establish a way of working that decreases complicatedness of corporate friction, okay? And that's just a cultural thing as well, right? That's why the POC definition is so important. Also, accommodate complexity, the intention of uncertain outcomes, because what feels natural, might not be that complex for them, but it might be complex to do it in the context of a corporate context. To create feedback and more intelligent teams and systems, so that new solutions can emerge. They won't come from nowhere. They will only come if you really are ready for this. Okay, so if you're not committed to that, that's why a lot of, I think, corporate accelerator programs, they don't work. There's a lot of presentations. Everyone gets to say they work with startups, but the outcome of what those things usually is limited, because no one commits to these kind of 4 points. Okay. When you've committed to that, then you can really get to a point where it's like, yeah, it makes sense to talk about agile methodology now, because we believe that value creation driven is really the way forward. And, that allows us to really deal with uncertain outcomes together and really innovate. And I think then you have a better chance of doing it. But before you deal with the things I just mentioned before, you don't even have to think about this. And that's really a key point. So be clear, and that's the last thing I want to talk about before we end here, because I try to keep this to be clear about how to iterate all intersections of innovation, because this is another really important thing that I feel strongly about, is that you can do all of these 3 things really well as a corporate, for that matter. Answer the question of, why you are here, for whom, and how do you say it, meaning talking to your brand and audience, right? creating a product that, gives a reason to interact, that has a great value proposition and creates a useful experience. Yeah. You can do really well the job of infrastructure and ecosystems, like that answers the questions, why are we going to scale faster than existing alternatives? What type of ecosystems and partners are going to allow us to grow? How are we going to use tech to create efficiency of scale? But the real music, the real, meat to the bone is going to happen in those really difficult intersections of those things. And, if you focus on those in your work for yourself, but also with any partners you have, you're going to get the increments that you need to really innovate. Which is, if you think about brand and product, you're really going to think about what is even the relevant promise you can make? That's the first thing, actually, if I'm honest. And then how do I keep that relevant promise so that I have a desired brand experience so this thing sells itself? So desirability of the thing you're building is not just a technical function, it's how sexy this thing feels and how intuitive it is to people that actually use it, right? And that's what engineer-minded companies forget. They think features matter. They don't. They matter to a point and then they lose it. What's more important is actually making those things desirable. Secondly, at the intersection of product and infrastructure and ecosystem, how do you really find a way of working so you can get feasible proofs of concept faster by combining your agility that the startup brings in with the corporate R&D function? And that's a big one, by the way. I mean, I can talk about 4 hours for that alone. And it's really interesting. But if you crack that nut, that's going to, really accelerate your growth. And the third thing is, how can we make viable scaling efforts through seamless tech and network scale effects and brand visibility? So that's really about looking at how can we do what branding used to do with TVs. How do we do that in the digital age? But it also looks at automation and those, again, are the hard parts because they require cross-functional collaboration, and it requires you to look at your partner, whether it's the corporate at the startup, of where does that fit in? Can I answer those questions? Okay, so that's my cheat sheet for you. I hope this was useful for you, and I'm just glad I made it through it here without the camera, and boom, we're done. Thank you very much.
Great, amazing. So not many of you know the thing. This is probably the 4th or 5th time I'm listening to Alexander, and every single time he opens up my mind. Like he comes up with something amazing that just blows me away. And thank you, Alex, for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule. That was a fascinating presentation that you put forward, and that is the reason why even we have believed that innovation and making sure that we tell the right kind of story is always complemented with each other. Now, moving ahead, we go forward for the roundtable, which is being moderated by Peter Mörsch. He's the CTO of Europe, Middle East and Africa Central Enterprise at Broadcom. With him are speakers Nelson, he's the founder of weSpark, Fabrizio, founder of Xperience Plus, and Pawel, engineering manager at Intel Corporations. And I would like to remind us once again, please ask your questions. We have made sure that we put forward your questions to the speakers on board. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Summit. It's a pleasure to be here, and we have great speakers with us, as you already explained. Before we going to start, I would like to ask to everybody is, I like this format a lot. It's really cool what Mainstage brought up in here. And if you like it as us, as me, please like it as LinkedIn as well, because I would like to be here next year again, I would say. So, we're talking about innovations, and Fabrizio talked about really cool things coming up in the future. We do not know, and we will ask him how close we are to this one. But what I would like to ask now, Pawel, is, even if we have this nice things on the edge at the people side, we need the supporting innovations at the network, etc. What do you think do we need at the back-end technology to get this done?
That's a great question. I think what the picture that Fabrizio was painting in front of us is very attractive, because it really consists the devices which we can touch. So we buy them, we keep them at home, and they're useful for us. But what those devices actually do is that they generate more data and they consume more data, and they come up with new requirements and new demands for delay. Of course, smaller delay is preferred, and the bandwidth that's available to them. So what we don't see when we use those devices is actually the whole infrastructure that stands behind it that makes it possible for them to operate. I think there are three important parts of that infrastructure. The first one is networking. So the telecommunication infrastructure that makes it possible for the data to move from one place to the other. The second one is processing power, let's say. So it's those are the computing nodes which actually process the information which the devices exchange. And the third one is storage. So the place in which the data is kept, so we can access them later and we can change them on the fly. So all those three areas actually need to keep up with the increasing pace in which the technological end devices develop and progress. So we need also to balance the development and balance the innovations that happen on the backend side. Actually, I would like to give example from the networking and from the processing domains. I think the most recent progress that we had there was entirely thanks to the startup companies which came up with totally new ideas how we can accelerate the processing of artificial intelligence workloads, how can we do faster, better trainings of neural networks, so that we maybe finally can retrain them on the fly, so we get the data that all those devices produce, and we don't need to run anything offline to prepare the new, better version of the neural network to make better decisions or deliver better results for our end users. So I think if we look at the whole picture, this forms, in a way, a circle. So we have this notion of a vicious circle. That's not a vicious circle, but that's a virtuous circle. And in that way, the innovation in one place creates space for innovation in the other, and the feedback just goes all the way back. That's how I see it.
Okay, very cool. So, well, you know what I heard is even in Germany and other countries, the 5G network is coming and is mostly rolled out, or partially rolled out. So this is going to support the new need for low latency and big traffic over the internet. And this is great. And this is going to support all the different kind of areas, and they connect the global thinking about innovation, Internet of Sense. Very cool. But Pawel, what is about security?
Well, with security, it's always that we don't keep it in the first place, but then it's the most important thing once something happens. I think when we look at, again, the whole ecosystem, the whole platform from end to end, then so there are two perspectives to look at the security. The first one, I think, is what we call the protection of data in transit. So when the data is moved from one place to the other, how can we make it secure? And the other is data at rest protection. So when the data is stored, how can we make it safe so that nobody can access what is not authorized to? And I think we, for a long time, had this analogy that if we have a system, the system is as strong as the weakest part of the system, or the chain is as strong as the weakest link. I think today, maybe it's not more the case, because the way that the security has to be taken care of is actually on all levels and all stages of the system. So that even if we break one link, it doesn't give much advantage to the hacker or whoever else, because all the others are equally secure and don't give away. So I think, well, it will remain. I think it will remain a problem for a long time, and there's also a factor of human factor in all of that. So the attempts to bring the sociological maneuvers to take over people devices and to enter to get access to unauthorized data is also a completely different thing, which probably didn't exist, like, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that we have security is very important, and from my perspective, this should be thought in the beginning as well, because it should be incorporated into the code, services, hardware, and what you mentioned as well is a social engineering. So it's on all areas where we have to look at, especially if we go with the mind thinking thing Fabrizio talked about with this nice headset, right? Okay. But leaving the part of technology behind, what else expect of technology is important for non-technical things in innovation? Pawel.
So here, I think we need to recognize that this crazy pace in which technology evolves is something we experience only for, well, several years, actually. It did not exist before. So our natural predispositions, the educational system that we have, and the cultural aspects, well, regardless of the particular culture in which we live, they all have been developed, they all have evolved in a totally different environment that we have today. So our natural predispositions are to look for order in the world, are to search for explanations, root causes. We try to apply best known methods to various problems that we face. We try to look for cause and effect relationships. And the reality today is that it doesn't work anymore, because the world has changed so much, and the rapid exchange of information is today completely transforming everything around us. So the point is that, we have a lot of frustration because of that, but also we need to build new skills and learn how to cope with this world in a new way. So I'd like to bring maybe your attention to the works in that field, which were laid out by David Snowden and Mary Boone, creators. Well, Dave is creator of the Cynefin framework for the decision making. Then we have Bonita Roy with the open participatory organization models. And finally, maybe Stanley McChrystal, US Army general, who comes up with the concept of team of teams. All of those things didn't exist yet in the last century, and they were not needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks he's gone. Okay.
No, he's not.
Thank you, Pawel, then. Now moving over to Nelson. But before I move over, I would like to make a poll to ask, do you think that security is very important for Internet of Sense? Okay. So, Nelson, I remember that private people adopted voice activation very, very soon, within a week, actually. Why does it take so long for people to adopt virtual reality? Do you have an answer to this?
Oh, all right. So that's an interesting question. I believe that there are like at least two elements about this. One is like from the technology part and the ease of usage. So if voice activation, let's say, I'm going to start with the example that I use the most. I have voice activation on my Xbox. If you go and say Xbox on, it turns on and it gives a huge satisfaction, right? But if you go and say Xbox on, and your video game console doesn't turn on, then it's a huge disappointment right away. But that's the sort of technology where there's not much experimentation to do. I mean, I guess many of us have tried for quite a while to check which potential comments are there, right? But at the end, it's not a technology that allows you to do many mistakes. It's just the comments that you have and the things that you can that you can ask, but there's no sort of comments beyond that. So when it comes to virtual reality, there's also the factor of ease of use. But you definitely, and this is the second element, you definitely have to bring something from your side. That means you have to be aware that when you go into new technologies that are more complex, that you will run into problems, and that if you want to use it, you will have to go sometimes to troubleshoot. It can be that you start right away. You start right away using something, and you expect in 1 minute to kind of be into a virtual reality. For example, the Facebook Oculus Quest 2 headset is starting to move a lot in virtual reality because it's kind of a plug and play thing. You put it on, within 5 minutes, you're into the game. But it's always this mix. How easy is the technology to use, and decide how willing are you to invest the time we're learning. An example of a great technology that is out there, actually, maybe you saw it was 3D printing, something behind it. 3D printing for end consumers. It's so easy to start, but this is definitely the sort of test and fail kind of process at the beginning. If you thought, okay, you're gonna get a printer at your home and you will just press on a button and start creating things, then you don't have the actual attitude that you need to adopt, the actual mindset to start using a 3D printer, because what's going to happen is you're going to get this technology at home, but you will not be able to discover what it does, because you might fail 1, 2, 3 times, and if you don't get the results that you expected, you will just leave it. And, there goes your money, there goes the technology.
Yes, I see exactly the same. If I'm getting a new device and it's not working, then I'll just leave it behind, and I'm not going to look at it for a long, long time. Thank you for this insight. By the way, Nelson, he's a founder of weSpark, so I guess you doing something like this the whole day, right? Talking with your customers about innovations to bring them into the market. Do you?
Yeah, totally. And if you allow me, what I have seen that at the very end, education, if I had to just narrow down to the topic that is so crucial, that is, if it works well, then you have an innovative company, innovative results, innovative process, innovative people and everything. And if it doesn't, you have basically nothing, just pure failure. And that's kind of the mindset. If you think about education and what we teach, what we actually learn at schools is that you go, you have an exam, there's 0 and 1, there's right and wrong, there's even you pass or you pass not, and you have grades for it. But in innovation, why don't we get educated in learning that failing is part of the process, right? So since the very education, we all grow up thinking that failing is wrong. And then later in the culture of the company, there are some companies, not many, but there are some companies that include a failure rate in part of their cost. And these are the companies that when they include there's going to be a failure rate and we're going to lose so and so much money trying, those are the companies that in the quantity of ideas that they test, that they will kind of grow it. So when I choose to work with the customer, because they all come to my company, I always check that this is a good match of synergy. If there's a company that has absolutely no chance to develop, let's say, like a mindset, and that they just expect to get into the process and start innovating, then I will just say, sorry, no, we don't really match together, because it's like imagine these innovation methods. It's like having a really nice technology that is out there, but you can only work first with the early adopters, and eventually with the time we will have more and more people willing to get into these processes and willing to innovate for real.
Yeah, I'm from Germany, and in Germany we design and finalize the tool and the new technology by 110% before going to the market. Completely different way. This is how it was for a long, long time. So thank you for these insights. Nelson.
Yeah, sure.
So,
I mean, there's always the chance to kind of disrupt that. I have seen that there are people willing to go the other way around, and that's why the business model works. But yeah, as you said, it feels like going against the flow, but somehow like going against the flow with a, like a motor jet with turbine, just really fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
But now when we talk about this very new innovation things, Fabrizio, you talked about this upcoming things, embodiment, brain-computer interfaces, etc. How far away is this from us? Can we use it tomorrow, or do we need 20 years before we can jump on this one?
Thank you, Peter, for the question. So basically, I think the problem is, what do you mean, can I use it? So let's make an example. I love what Eugenio wrote about VR. VR required equipment and the issue with ease of use it. But now there are VR facilities, so you can use them going there without buying the devices. And by the way, I just say, I don't understand what's the problem with Apple during my speech with standards as well. I don't understand why people say we have to produce something that could be democratic. We work on an abundance and release devices for 2,000 and more euros. So the problem is the normal level of adoption, I think. So, for example, a telephone. You have your mobile. Do you remember the first mobile? Have you ever bought one of the big mobile with battery that cost a lot of money? So if you think about it, and if you think, okay, I can spend a couple of hundred of euros, you will start in a couple of months. And when I say, okay, super spoiler, this is what we are working on. We are working on with Pedro, because he's a crazy guy as me, and he's creating an ecosystem to allow people to use this thing. So basically, our job is the protocol, is the technology, is a POC, and now it's getting a product. But at the end, what we are working is creating an alliance of people who want to push it forward. And the devices are already on the market. You can spend a couple of hundred of euros and have your smell emitters and mount on your VR. But if you don't want, you can jump on an event on a VR facility and test it. So if you're thinking about the end solution, so the perfect mass market solution, probably it will take, a couple of years, especially brain-computer interfacing. We are pretty far from transmitting brain to brain. You know better than me, I think. But if you're thinking about the other devices, as I say, give us 4 months and we will bring you to Frankfurt, New York, Seattle, and a lot of places where you can enter, touch, sniff, taste, whatever.
Okay. Then thank you, everybody here. I thank you, Pawel, Nelson, Fabrizio, to be joining here this round table. It was very cool. For everybody else, after this session, we have the fireside chat, then we're moving over to the networking phase, and we will be there. Please join us. Please ask us questions about 5G, about the data center, etc. And I would say now we're going to move over to the fireside chat. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nelson, Fabrizio, and Pawel. That was really insightful. And moving ahead, for the fireside chat, we have Dipjyoti Dev. He's the venture partner at Bosch Siemens Hardware Startup Kitchen. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Dipjyoti, can you please unmute? Perfectly. So now we have spoken about hardware. We have spoken about fancy things like, brain interfaces. We have talked about innovation, that how to adopt it. The question I have to you, and maybe we discuss this a bit, is how does innovations improve the quality of life? Do you have any example that was a game changer to you or to the market?
Well, a very interesting. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me. And I think it was a fascinating discussion what we had till now. And what I will say have something to overlap with Alexander. And the reason is this aspect of the idea of innovation and invention. We at times do not see the difference, but the innovation is the key driver which makes invention great. And I give you an example for that. 10 years ago, when I left India my mother used to wash most of her stuff and our stuff on her own. In last 5 years, we have 2 washing machines. So one at the top floor and the other is a bit older one. And if you imagine in last 20, 30 years, especially in a country like Europe, the impact of washing machine is it's almost like a freedom to most of the women who would had to carry things to a river, take water, warm them and clean. So I think what we often forget that innovation doesn't need to be a flying washing machine. You need a device which can help you to free your time, and that's a very big jump from being captive, having less, doing less productive work to moving into higher productive work. So I would say for me, washing machine and dishwasher are the 2 quite amazing inventions which turn into innovation and is serving us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about many things: refrigerator, phone, cell phones, etc. So there are a lot of things that make our life much easier. If you think about the private life, what would be an invention you are going to look for?
So
what
actually,
you're waiting for?
There are certain things where it connects directly to the topic we were discussing before. And that is, if you think about your kitchen, it's a bit like a production plant. So you have a warehouse, which is your fridge. You have a place where you are producing what you want to deliver on plate, which is your cooktop. And then you have a supply chain through which your food is, or the raw ingredients are being delivered to you. And there are a lot of small bits and pieces, which I won't say one single innovation will solve this, but few series of innovation falling on each other at the same time will solve certain things. As an example, if you think about fridge, we often identify that something is getting rotten inside the fridge after the smell starts to get into our nose. And if you think about sensors, we already spoke about this, that having a chemical to digital nose inside your fridge can easily reduce this food waste, because we are far ahead in context of even eliminating the aspect with machine learning that we do not need as much of gases that we need for ourselves. So for me, if we can deliver a solution which comes from end to end in context of reducing food waste, I just said one as a smelling device maybe, but from end to end in context of dealing with the food waste would be something I'm looking forward to, especially in context of greenhouse emission and reduction of greenhouse emission.
Yeah, would be a perfect idea. Somewhere I have seen a video where a small device, everybody knows, a lamp, is turning from a lamp with a sensor into a security mechanism network. Why is it working? Because the lamp itself does nothing. It just, you switch it on and off. If you put a sensor on it, it can turn on and off if somebody moves into the room. If you connect it to the internet, it can tell you if somebody moves into the room. So it moves from a small pace of a lamp to shine light to a security device. So this is amazing. If you're going to connect, like you said, different pieces to one service. So from my perspective, it's not only innovation to have the different pieces and hardware, but the service on top is also very, very nice. But talking about the innovations now, what is in the business life? We talked about private life, how this can be improved. What about business?
The interesting thing is the business and the private aspect have some conceptual overlap. As I also said about, you can deal with your kitchen as a factory, and you take the whole concept into a real factory in context of Industry 4.0, let's say. And what happens in a production plant most of the time is someone is standing in front of a production line. They're looking at a specific part saying, okay, it's good enough. And then it's going forward and they have to stop, press a button, so on and so forth. Now imagine that this person is not really a perfect individual. He might have a bad day, or she might have a bad day. Things can completely change, quality can alter, and you can put two very interesting piece of technology there. One of them is optical inspection, identifying the defect without much variant. And the second part is a voice interface. So I do not need to press a button because it's a lot of time. I can basically say, go ahead, and the machine on itself takes it to the next stage. But for me, the biggest change that I see will be happening is in context of supply chain, and mostly the impact coming from the artificial intelligence side, because one aspect to the ESG impacts, and the other aspect to cost, especially after what happened in the COVID time, the agility in the supply chain will become one of the driving forces, or let's say the highest risk if someone's supply chain is not agile enough. And my bet will be in that part, in context of what we are seeing at present. And here you again see the aspect of sensing in context in context of how the production plants are being run might change a lot.
Yeah, I can see this. There can be more automation, the increased quality, less waste. So can be a big improvement in this as well. And what do you think is, or what do you think? I think there's so much improvements we can do in all kind of areas for startups to join us. You know, big companies like your company, my company, we have innovations. Mostly nobody sees because more of the big technical companies coming in. But there are small innovations, Internet of Things, etc., commonplace, and there's so much room for startups to grow. What do you think?
We absolutely believe that if you talk about innovation, startup are the fuel to go forward with, irrespective of a corporate or an SME. And the reason behind this is, I give you a very specific example that I was talking about, a sensor in a fridge which can identify smell. Can a corporate invent that? Absolutely, but this will take time, this will take resource, this will take a lot of other things where the corporate may not have access to those resources. But for a startup, it's possible, and the corporate's role is to onboard this solution as soon as possible, as fast as possible, test, and actually do what they are doing, rather than trying to invent something they are not experts in. And in the healthcare section, there's a very nice joke on this, that any corporate can invent the COVID vaccine if they hire enough talented people and build their own lab by 2050. But the problem is we don't need COVID vaccine in 2050. We need it now. And that's why startups are almost a basic fuel that will drive innovation in next years as well.
Yeah. You know, my last point on this is then, if I'm looking at startups, you know, what startups are doing is they're finding spots in services, hardware, software, etc., where nobody else is. They're finding these spots and they innovate technology where they feel this is good and can be a benefit. And this is something where we really innovate, where we speed up the innovation, because like corporate things, we think in narrow areas, but they think globally. They think more free to do something like this. What do you think?
So for us, when we work with startups, we are geography agnostic, and the thing is that the main focus is this solution 10x better? So what's the USP for the startup rather than where they come from? Because innovation can come from any shape, from anywhere, and that's a very important thing. And there are several amazing examples of this. For example, when Ebola breakout happened, there was a startup called Atomwise of basically 3 guys in a room who helped with the help of IBM to restrict Ebola spread. And that's why you kind of have to be open in grasping the concept that startups can come from anywhere. And the other part is they might be able to see the problem in a very different way how a corporate sees it. More than that, they can also transfer solutions from one area to other, which corporate generally do not think about.
Okay, very cool. So this was a fireside chat. Thank you very much to Dipjyoti from Bosch Siemens Hausgeräte. I guess I will hand over to Summit.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Thank you, all the speakers. Yes, I understand there are certain announcements that were supposed to be made over here, but our speakers in the final session, final track, they are eagerly waiting to go ahead, and that is my favorite track. It's going to be about sales, and at the end of, oh my God, I'm so hyped right now. At the end of that session, there are certain announcements that Sven, me, and Debashish we're going to make. So stay tuned. We'll see you at the sales cycle. There are amazing events, amazing sessions that are going to happen, great speakers, and this particular fireside chat, which we are all super excited about, between a mentor and a mentee. We'll see you in the next session, guys. See you there.